When you've been in the business for 5 years or 20 years, you know a lot more than you think you do. And yet, when someone asks you to estimate a project, we get out all these spreadsheets, right? And we have these complicated ways of doing it. And yet, if somebody calls me today and says, I have this project and the team is doing an okay job, but now the quality sucks or they missed the deadline, after a few minutes, I can start to think, oh, their team must have lost their lead, or something like that. Or maybe the team underestimated it. Or maybe this client is a huge pain in the ass, and they're just a nightmare to work with, and that's why it's slow. You know right away. Have you ever had this experience? Right? That is your intuition coming out. If you had a partner in a business, and the two of you were talking about how to estimate some project, you would use that intuition. And yet, every time I get a project estimated for me, instead of doing the intuitive, like the Yoda approach, you get this giant spreadsheet with just the hours and no other information, okay? And that is not how partners would do it. So let's talk a little bit about how to estimate intuitively, and then we'll give it a try in a way that we can actually do it for a client. This is the way that we came up with to estimate projects intuitively. Any project can be expressed like that, literally. 10 people for 10 months. 3 people for a week, or 100 people for 24 months, whatever it is. If you start to get into this mentality of just forcing your intuition out, it helps your estimation a lot. And we'll try a little exercise. This is normally the big exercise, but we're limited on time. But the idea is you put a development challenge on the screen, and hopefully one of you will jump in and estimate it immediately. It's called the hot seat exercise. You can't ask any questions, you don't get any detail, it's just nothing. So I'll do the first one. Space Invaders in JavaScript. A really good JavaScript developer could probably build that in, like a week or two. But we're talking about reality, so you have to test it, perfect it, right? Give it love, make it perfect, fool around with the browsers. But still, one good developer could do that in, 4 or 5 weeks? Something like that? Am I sure? No. It's just like the Yoda, your inner Yoda coming out. So let's try another one. Convert a WordPress theme to a Drupal theme. Is it a complex theme? You don't know. Is it a well-built theme? You don't know anything. How long would it take? How many people for how many months or weeks? Somebody?
It depends.
Wrong answer. Okay, but what about your inner Yoda or your inner Darth Vader? Something. There's got to be some feeling. I bet you a lot of you are thinking of it. Somebody yell it out. Don't make me do it.
2 people, 5 weeks.
How many?
2 people, 5 weeks.
Okay, that's pretty good. That's a good guess. That's very similar to what I had in my mind. Normally people say things like one developer for 2 weeks, right? But then you think about it more and you realize it's not really like that, because then you give it to the client and there's tweaking and there's a browser and there's an IE9 and all this stuff. So that's good. Let's try another one. Anybody want to raise their hand and volunteer before you see it? These are going to get harder and weirder. HTML client, FTP client, totally browser-based. It's pretty straightforward. We know the spec, not too risky. What do you think? You can yell it out. One developer, 1 week? That would have to be a really good developer. You could probably make it work in a week. Good. There you go. It's your first thought. Now, normally we're going to take this discussion, if we're really estimating for a client, we're going to talk about it for like an hour. So the idea is not that you have to answer immediately. In this exercise, you do. But you're not going to be correct immediately. Maybe you will. The idea is that you're going to pull the intuition out. I would say more like 2 weeks, one developer. But it doesn't really matter. We're just a starting point. All right. Somebody raise their hand. Who will sit on the hot seat? Who's brave? Who has been in this business long enough to just estimate a project immediately with no information?
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
What do you think?
I'd be thinking a team of, let's say a team of 3 people for 2 months.
3 people for 2 months?
More.
5 people for 2 months? You have, no, the unlimited budget. But remember, Oculus Rift is pretty unstable.
To make it successful enough to be in production?
Oh yeah, we're talking about
Okay.
from the beginning to the end, when you ship it.
Minecraft. So it would be 6 months. A team of 4 people, 6 months.
Okay, that sounds a little more like it. Anyone else? Very quiet crowd. Okay. This is going to be a super crazy one. I want somebody to raise their hand. Okay. You ready?
Yes. That's a perfect one. I'm actually in sales. I don't do development. I've never done it. So I always get this from clients. I would say,
It's a big
so
job.
from scratch, we have all the requirements. We know exactly what we need to build.
Yeah, we know what it is.
Yeah. I would say 300 developers 1 year.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I might even expand that. So if we were to sit down at a table and really talk about that, we could probably come up with some kind of a reasonable estimation. So it seems like it's ridiculous to look at that and just say, boom, there's my answer, right? That's crazy. But then again, if we took a bunch of people in this room and we broke off into groups and one of them listed out every single thing that Facebook does, which is really hard to do, and then they estimated each piece, which is really hard to do, and then added it up all together, which is easy, is that going to be any more accurate than what you just said? I don't know. I mean, if you spent 4 hours estimating it the old-fashioned way, and you spent 4 hours estimating it just from your mind, which would be more accurate? I don't know, but probably this intuitive estimation would be pretty good, and it's much easier, and it's much less scary. So that's the idea. The idea of the exercise is not to demonstrate that you can estimate like this. The idea of the exercise is to show that you can estimate pretty well without doing any math.